Let me say a few words before they go into their update. First, I want to thank all of our water customers who have been impacted by this advisory for their patience these past days. I understand the public has a number of concerns, which we hope to address this evening. The City of West Palm Beach Vulnerable Populations Water Advisory remains in effect. Vulnerable populations, as outlined in the advisory, should continue to follow the advisory. Now, the advisory was issued after cylindrospermopsin, a toxin produced by cyanobacteria, formerly known as blue-green algae, was detected by the city in the water system. Individuals not listed in the advisory may continue to use the water to drink, cook, and bathe. The city anticipates being able to lift the water advisory upon receipt of test results. How do we get here? The city has, for years, been proactively testing for this toxin, and the test is not required routinely for treatment facilities. The toxin is caused, the presence of the algal toxin is a result of environmental conditions. Public utilities could not have prevented its development, but the department has been responsive from day one and acted on this concern immediately. When the blue-green algae toxin presented, the City of West Palm Beach Department of Public Utilities took immediate steps to mitigate the impacts and began powdered activated carbon treatment on May 19th, 2021, and later introduced temporary free chlorine water disinfection. The city has also introduced groundwater from the eastern well field and western well field to help reduce levels of algae in the system. City employees continue to work around the clock to address this concern. I speak with them regularly, if not hourly, to direct the city's response. Public utilities, communications, emergency management, and Parks and Rec are all working very hard, and I'm proud of their response. I've met with senior management over the holiday weekend, both Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon, to make sure that we were on track with our response. Now, this morning, the Public Utilities Department collected multiple samples, and with the assistance of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, City of West Palm Beach Public Utilities Laboratory Manager John Maxted flew lab samples of city water to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in Tallahassee for testing. The flight, which was facilitated by Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, was conducted by PBSO aboard the sheriff's plane, and I can't thank the sheriff enough for making that plane available. I also want to thank President Peduzzi for bringing that possibility to our attention. And not only did they fly up today, but they are going to fly another sample up to Tallahassee tomorrow morning. This shaves a day off of our response. Otherwise, we would have had it sent it by Federal Express and wouldn't get up there till tomorrow, and then they test it. So the city intends to send additional samples to Tallahassee on tomorrow. Once the results return showing levels of blue-green algae toxin below the EPA health advisory levels, the city will work with the Florida Department of Health to begin the process of lifting the advisory. And the city has been in touch with the Department of Health throughout this process. Let's talk about how the city is reaching out and helping its residents. The City of West Palm Beach will continue to operate a point of distribution at Gaines Park at 1501 North Australian Avenue for the distribution of water to vulnerable populations impacted by the drinking water advisory issued on Friday, May 28th, 2021. On Wednesday, the Gaines Park pod will operate from 9 a.m. To noon. We started this pod on Saturday. The advisory went out late Friday evening, and on Saturday we were up and running with a pod. By noon on June 1st, noon today, the City of West Palm Beach had distributed 199,500 bottles, or 137 pallets over 4 days of pod operation. Now, let me address this rumor that's out there that the city is somehow hiding this from the public, hiding the existence of the toxin from the public. Nothing could be further from the truth. Again, this is not a toxin that the city is required to test for. The city was proactive in its testing and has been testing for this toxin since 2016. So if we are going to be proactive about testing for a toxin we didn't have to test for, why in the world were we trying to hide the results? We were proactive in testing because we want to do everything we can to provide the best water available. And then our response, by doing follow-up testing and confirmatory testing in the 3 subsequent days, was in line with the guidance of the recommendations of the Environmental Protection Agency. So we continue to work with the Florida Department of Health and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, have been in communication with them throughout. Also, again, want to express appreciation to Sheriff Bradshaw for facilitating the flight of our lab samples this morning. County Administrator Videnia Baker has also offered assistance. This afternoon, I convened a call with a number of local elected officials at the state and federal level and local level to communicate to them the city's response. Senator Bobby Powell, State Senator Bobby Powell, and County Commissioner Mac Bernard both offered their the assistance of the state and the county, and I want to thank them for all the help that they have been offering. So we have, through this process since Friday, been working with and communicating with other agencies, including the Department of Health and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. All of our advisories are posted on the city's website at www.wpb.org. Should the public have any questions about the water advisory or for additional information, please call the city's hotline, 561-822-2222, 561-822-2222. So Dr. Calcat will talk a bit about the testing process and how we got here, and then we're going to have Assistant Chief Brent Bloomfield talk about, with more data, about our efforts to distribute water to those in need. Dr. Calcat.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners, City Administrator. First of all, I want to thank our residents, our customers, for the patience. This is not easy. We all want to make sure that we have safe water all the time. That's what we work towards on all the time. 24/7 is what our staff is working to ensure that that's what happens. So I want to thank everybody for their patience. I understand this is a big concern for everybody, and I'm here to answer questions to the best of my ability. Like Mayor James said, we have been working on getting proactive on a lot of fronts, and this was one of those. Cylindrospermopsin is not one of the EPA-regulated toxins. We had, a couple of years ago, I ended up going on to an EPA emerging contaminant webinar and looked at some of those things, and we saw that this was one of the emerging contaminants, started discussing internally with our lab personnel as well as with our plant personnel, and decided that we would like to start monitoring this. So we started monitoring for cylindrospermopsin in 2016, like the mayor said. We've been monitoring for another algal toxin, microcystin, since 2012. And each month, we would sample and monitor both raw water as well as finished water. Actually, on May 3rd, on our regular monthly sampling, we ended up, we checked that, did that, and on May 5th, we got the results that were under any harmful levels or advisory levels. So we were not going to do any more sampling until June first week. We hadn't seen any algal blooms near the plant at that point for us to give any indication that we need to do any more sampling here. We were starting a process. We were building a structure, and that structure was getting finished up. That was a powdered activated carbon structure that was being built. Those basins are being built to get contact time with powdered activated carbon, which can help for some other taste and odor and even these algal toxins. And so when that project was finished, to certify that project, we needed to get a 7-day test for running the pack, increasing doses and checking. And before we did that, we decided we would like to go ahead and do a sample for just as a baseline. That's what was sampled on May 17th. We got the results on the 19th, and the results were high. We had never seen anything like this to be high. We had no other reason to believe so that there would be a reason to have higher sample results. So we decided that we needed to do confirmatory tests, which is what EPA regulations generally prescribe. So we decided to go and do those, and we had to do 3 consecutive days tests so we could see what the difference with adding powdered activated carbon might help or not. And it does take it out, but it was not taking it out completely when we got our results from the 24th, 25th, and 26th. Those sample results came back on 27th, and 28th, when those were high, we called and started talking to Department of Health on 28th, and 28th night, we issued the water advisory. We have spoken to Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health throughout this whole incident, and Department of Environmental Protection actually has a lab that looks at toxins, and they monitor these, and they haven't seen this come up. And so they've told us that this is almost uncharted territory in some respects, and they are right now currently working on getting guidance out and figuring out what kind of notifications and levels and all of those things need to be done for the state. They're not, I think there are only 2 other states in the country that have set a level for this algal toxin. Florida does not have a level. EPA has a health advisory level, but nothing that's a regulatory level. But like Mayor James said, we proactively want to look for these things. We want to do whatever we need to do to get this into a better place. And we are working very hard on 24/7 to really get us back to normalcy. So that's what our main goal is. We are sampling, like we said, we sampled today. We got those, we're hoping we are going to get those results by tomorrow. We're going to sample again. We're going to sample every day until we get results that are clear and cleared by Department of Environmental Protection and Department of Health. And after that, we will get into maybe a more frequent monitoring, look at options. We are looking at long-term options of what to do. We're looking out at throughout the country, if there are other places that have had similar incidents, what kind of things have they put in place that works. We started doing free chlorination. Free chlorination really helps to knock this toxin out, and we started doing that on Saturday. We've had our staff out flushing to pull the water throughout our distribution system, so we have free chlorine throughout the system. So we're going to continue doing that too. Even after we get clean samples, we are probably going to do, for good measure, we're going to, and being cautious, we are going to do more chlorination, free chlorination. So we also, as Mayor James stated, that we've started bringing water in from eastern wellfield and western wellfield, and groundwater can help because it has a slightly higher, it has higher conductivity and lower pH, and those things will help with algal growth. So we're doing that. Now, another thing I want to just remind everybody that we haven't had any rain for at least over a month. And our system is a rain-driven system. During dry season, we get water from Lake Okeechobee through L8 Canal. Since April 26th, we actually have closed down our control structure 2 because L8 Canal and Lake Okeechobee have had algal growth. So we didn't want to bring that algae into our system. But what that's done, without any rain coming, our levels have been dropping constantly. And if you've driven around Australia, you've seen the lake levels drop. So all of those things, as lake levels drop, as the daytime increases, the light increases, and some of the submergent plantings are going to be exposed, you can start having more algal growth also. So because of that, we have been talking to South Florida Water Management District to allow us to start using Eastern Wellfield. Our water use permit has certain levels at the lake that allow you only after you reach a certain level, that's when you can get you can start your eastern well field. And if you get to a certain more lower level, then you can start your western well field. So we are going to continue having discussions with them, with South Florida, to look at our water use permit, look at what we need to do in the future so we don't have to wait so long in the season, and maybe start some of this, bringing some of the groundwater in slightly earlier. So those are all the things that we are continuing to do. We have a very vigilant staff that look at source water on a weekly, daily basis, depending on what's going on throughout our canal conveyance systems, throughout the watershed, throughout both Twin Lakes. We also have brought in, I think in a year and a half ago, we actually started doing in our city lab, we started looking at a semi-quantitative method that we use to look at water samples to see if we see any algal growth and what kind of algae, so that gives us an indication. And we've continued to do that. We don't do any toxin sampling analysis in-house. We're looking at that, whether that would be an option in the future. We're also looking at, are there other tests out in the world that can help us give more real-time information so we can react more quickly. And we are going to continue working with Department of Health and Department of Environmental Protection to get guidance on any kind of situation like this if an incident was to come up again. I'm more than happy to answer questions if there are questions for me.
Let me also say something, Commissioners, because I know that on Friday, you may have heard from other elected officials before you even knew what was going on. For that, I apologize. We, as the city or staff, did not contact those elected officials directly. Once we talked to the Department of Health, and I understand the county has a protocol that once we communicate with the Department of Health, and they communicate to the county administrator, who then talks to each of the individual commissioners. I started getting texts of support, but still text at 5 o'clock that evening, and we were still waiting for, and Poonam, I'd like for you to talk about this somewhat, waiting to get the text of the advisory. And my understanding is that the messaging we put out to the public has to be approved by the Department of Health. So I didn't feel comfortable calling you, Commissioners, because I didn't know what to tell you. I could tell you about the level of testing, but I didn't know what to tell you in terms of what the next steps were. So to the extent you heard from other elected officials, that's how that played out, and I apologize because I did not intend for that to happen. But Poonam, can you talk about what restrictions we as the city have when it comes to putting out or even communicating about advisories?
Yes, for the regulated compounds that are in the drinking water EPA regulations wise, those are prescribed playbook, and we already have text as to what we need to put in the advisories, and we still have to make sure that Department of Health is okay with that and blesses it. But this one, we had EPA guidelines of what the wording needs to be, what language needs to be, but we were waiting for some of the health impacts that DEP was looking into and DOH was looking into. And so it took us a little bit of time getting all that information together, and then when we were able to get the language to them, DOH finally blessed it and said, yes, you're good to go, and we put it out as soon as we could. So I was getting Mayor James, City Administrator Johnson were calling and asking, where are we with this? And we were calling Department of Health and asking and working with them. So it took a little bit of time because this is not, yes, there is EPA guidelines on what to say, but that still needs to be, because it's not specific for each of these algal toxins. It's general for algal toxins. It's not for cylindrospermopsin. And we wanted to make sure we were putting out the right thing, so that there was a little bit of time that we needed to work with our regulatory agencies, and we were able to get it out based on that.
For example, if we had told you half the story, that we had higher testing, and somehow that word would have leaked out, the natural reaction for many people would have been to start boiling water. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. In this case, we found out. Apparently, boiling water makes the situation worse. So we needed to understand who was affected, what the degree of affectation was, and what to tell people to do or not to do. And that's the language we were waiting on, and we didn't get that until pretty late in the evening on Friday. Now, the other area, and this is a learning lesson, is that we got the advisory out, and we sent it through normal channels, email blasts, et cetera, and we had assumed that you as commissioners would have gotten that. What we've learned and what I've told communication is that when something like that happens, send a separate email to the commissioners. So we're not relying upon you to get it pursuant to an e-blast. So that's a lesson learned. And in the future, on this or other matters of this ilk, we'll make sure to send a separate email to you with the requested, with the designated information. Anyway, so questions for Dr. Kalkat? I'm sure there are many. Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'd just like to get a little bit more understanding. You know, you've provided a bit of clarity here today on the timeline, because there are two separate issues here. There's the science, where we were proactively testing for something that we didn't need to test for, and I think that part of the procedure worked, right? We did the testing, we got back the results. Where the challenge came up was in the communication of those results. So looking at the timeline of 5/5, we were testing, we were clear. 5/17 was the first time that we had a test that was above normal levels, understanding that maybe you need a second test to confirm that. By 5/19, we had the results that said there was a second test that confirmed there were higher levels. So at that point, why would we not communicate the most conservative? I understand we don't have direction to say boil water, don't boil water, but at that point we know that there is an issue. So why would we not take the most conservative route to issue a notice that there were these toxins found, or whatever the guidance may be, as far as even just we're asking vulnerable populations to not use water at that time. So why the delay from the 19th, then we had tests on the 24th, the 25th, the 26th, and down the line? I think that's what's the hard thing to comprehend.
So the sampling was done on the 17th. We got the results on the 19th. And we needed to do at least a confirmatory test. The labs, those labs run only Monday through Friday, and you have to get them the samples by Thursday so that they can, Wednesday, Thursday, so that they can run the samples, because the test takes time and they can't start a test and not do it. So we usually try and get them all the samples by Wednesday so they have enough time to run those. So when we were going to do the 3 consecutive days of confirmatory tests, that's why we decided to go with 24th, 25th, and 26th. And we got the first results on the 27th.
But to answer the A part of your question, Commissioner, you said, why wouldn't we either tell the public or tell vulnerable populations not to use water? We didn't know who the vulnerable populations were. We did not know whether it was seniors, whether it's children under 6. The list of vulnerable populations came to us in the direction from the Department of Health. So at the time we got these increased test results, we did not have the answer to the follow-up question, which is who is affected, how might they be affected, and how do we protect them? We didn't have the answer to that, so we couldn't say, here's a list of vulnerable populations, we got a high result, here's a list of vulnerable populations, we may have a problem. We didn't know what that list was until the Department of Health got back to us late Friday evening. Am I correct?
Yes, and I just want to say one more thing. If you look at the EPA guidelines, it actually gives you a 10-day advisory period, which means that you have 10 days to advise, because they want to make sure that you're confirming and getting those test results. So that's what we were going by, that until we get those confirmations, we have to make sure, and because we haven't seen this before, we really thought there must be something wrong in how the lab did the test or something. Maybe there were 2 raw samples that they ran or did something different. So we just wanted to go back and make sure that we had that right. And we had started On the 19th, before we received any of the samples back, we didn't know whether we were going to have a high sample or not, but we had started the Pac Basin because we had started the test. So then we wanted to check whether that Pac, which is powdered activated carbon, could also help bring this down. So that's why we wanted to do those 3 confirmatory tests and had that 10-day advisory from EPA guidelines.
And thank you for that, Mayor, too, that explanation. And certainly while I understand there's the need for confirmation, I guess when it comes to this or any other, even a regulated item, if there was a question, not knowing the vulnerable populations, if we thought there was a vulnerability to any population, what is the mechanism that says, no, everyone switch to bottled water? Take that most conservative precaution, and maybe something that will help me understand this. And one of the other questions I had in my mind was, as far as the testing for this, there is algae, there are nutrients, there are all kinds of things in water. It's a living thing, and there's some sort of saturation point. So just like the same as ocean water has a certain amount of salinity, and there gets to be a point where your water is too salty. Can you explain to me in testing, there will be a natural occurring level of algae that's in water. At what point are we here? Is the scale 1 to 10 and 5 is the danger zone and we're at a 5.5? Can you explain how the testing works and what the scale is and where we fall on that?
I'll try. It's not that easy for me to probably explain it, or I'm going to hope that I'm going to explain it as best as I can. But basically, we've had higher levels of the algal toxin in the raw water in the past, and being able to take it out in the treatment plant. So we've been through a much higher level in the raw water and not had a problem taking it out. So that was another thing that was a little bit of an anomaly. That's why we were like, this something's not right. So we are going back and looking at everything for that reason also, to check whether anything could be different. For the levels, EPA sets a level of health advisory level of 0.7 ppb is what EPA sets it at. We had the highest level we've had was 1.5. Couple of other states, like I've mentioned, and maybe a couple of countries have decided to set a advisory level at 1. So this is still an upcoming science. They're still working through. I'm very sure after this incident that Department of Environmental Protection is working on guidelines. Their toxicologists are looking at everything, and I'm pretty positive that they are probably going to come up with some kind of guidelines for all surface waters or anybody who stores water in a surface water reservoir for that reason, so that they can tell us, is it 0.7, is it 1, what is considered health advisory. And remember that usually there's always a margin that is kept even with these health advisory levels.
Other questions? Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this information now. I had similar questions to Commissioner Schoaf, and given the answers that you have given us, is there any reason why we wouldn't start some of the mitigation efforts when we got the first high result on the 19th?
So we had started the powdered activated carbon right away. So, and that was before the results actually came back. So that's what we were looking at. We are going to evaluate everything that we do. Like I said, we are going to also have consultation with other either counties or cities that have gone through this. If they've put things in place, we are continuing to talk to DEP, and we have been talking to DEP as well as DOH to look at whether there are other things that can be done. How can you mitigate? One of the things, like I mentioned, was to try and look at, sit down with district, South Florida Water Management District, to see if we can change how we bring our groundwater assets into play maybe earlier in the season, so we don't get to a point where we are getting algal blooms. Keep in mind that algae seems to be a very unpredictable thing. So it is, so just because you sampled it one day, the next day you may not have it or something like that, that's not a guarantee. So we are going to look at whether there are things that we can do in-house that'll give us a little bit of, hey, it's usually the season that tells you that when you have long days, it's starting to get very hot and you're not really getting any rainfall. Those are static kind of conditions where algae does grow. So that is a reality for any surface water reservoir. And so we look at doing inspections on a regular basis, doing sampling on a regular basis, bringing some semi-quantitative sampling that we are doing right now, where for the last couple of years, to just look at whether there are some things that might be growing that might give us an indication. So we are doing some of those things already, and we are looking at what else do we need to bring in so we can have a much, a better, like you said, maybe something that tells us. So we do have instrumentation out in our source water. We call them data sondes. They look at some of the either indicator analysis or tests that can tell you, say, for example, chlorophyll A comes to mind, that can tell you that if your chlorophyll A results are really high, then maybe there could be an algal bloom in the making. So we are doing those things already proactively too, and we've continued to do that for years. So we will continue to do much more, whatever we need to do, because we want to make sure that our residents are they get the safest water that we can provide. That's always the
Poonam,
goal.
I don't want this point to get lost. When did you start using the powdered activated carbon, and then talk about the experience and why you use PAC and our experience with it in the past?
So the plant has two treatments that usually take out algal toxins. One is powdered activated carbon, and then you have biological filters that have granulated activated carbon. And both of those things usually will take out all kind of algal toxins. So we had started the PAC around, I think, in the morning of 19th, and we didn't get the results of this algae even until later that day. So we had just started doing that, and once we saw that, we did up the amount of PAC we were putting in, and our biological activated filters are still working. We are also going back, and we are going to do some core sampling for that biological activated carbons to look at how our granulated activated carbon is doing. We want to look at whether there's anything that we need to replace in there. So we are doing all of those things to check what could be the reasons for not being able to knock off the algae in the treatment.
But where I was getting at, I think the public needs to understand what our experience had been in using PAC in the past, and why we were looking to the powdered activated carbon and started using that even before we had test results on the raw water.
Yes, so we have used PAC in the past. The reason we were building the basin was to get a better contact time for some of the taste and odor kind of algal toxins that come up. But we have used PAC for years in the intake, and that has always helped us whenever we were going to get any kind of algae bloom. Sometimes when there's a hurricane coming, we will proactively start putting some PAC in the water to pull down some of these algal toxins, and the treatment plant of sedimentation and filtration then takes care of that too.
Follow up, Commissioner.
Thank you. Although I'm not still clear on if on the 7th, I believe, or the 4th, when we did our first test, it came back at not an alarming rate. You said we normally wouldn't do the test until the beginning of June. Then why were we looking to use PAC if we didn't think that the levels were high?
So we were doing a testing for the Pac Basin. It's a new construction that we've completed, and for it to get certified, we had to do a 7-day test on the PAC. We were going to start at a low dose and increase the dose, look at whether the dosing was going okay, and we thought that might as well do a baseline test on the algal toxins and see, when we increase the dose of PAC, how much can we take out as we increase the dose. So that was the purpose of that test, and that's why we did a baseline.
And so it worked out that
baseline came up high, and we actually ended up we did the confirmatory test. So I'm very glad that we were doing something more than we were required to. We didn't need to do even a baseline for that Pac Basin test, and there was no requirement that we had to do. We just thought, might as well, if we are going to dose PAC and dose it at different levels, might as well check if there is any algae coming in. Can we knock down this percent with this much level, higher percent? So we said, let's go ahead and do a baseline. So We are very glad that we did that test on the 17th, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have known that there was any kind of algal toxin. There was nothing that was on the surface in the plant intake for us to see visually that there was something growing. So we would have not noticed it. So that's why we're looking at other ways so we can be more proactively this would be known to us early on.
Further questions? Mr. President, you have a follow-up?
I do, Mayor.
Okay.
It just that, we've been hearing about the blue-green algae, and clearly we've been testing for it since 2016. And I appreciate that we've been testing without it being required, but had we not thought about some mitigation, or I guess this was the mitigation that we were doing, but I just feel like we didn't have a plan in place, or, that it just took so long that we've been looking at this since 2016, but, why didn't we have a more concise plan in place to be able to mitigate it?
So if you look at EPA guidelines, there are other things that you can put in place. Free chlorine is one of those. That's what we started right after we saw the confirmatory results come back. There are other things like ozone and other things that you can use, but all of those are really pilot tested when there is a real issue with this toxin. And like I said, in the state of Florida, they haven't seen this come up in drinking water. So it wasn't something that has been out there. We've been testing just so that we have data so we can continue looking at whether there's something we need to proactively start before it becomes a problem. It just so happened that this incident came up without really getting to that point where we thought we needed to put something more in place.
All right, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mayor. And not to diminish the importance of my colleagues' questions, but at this point, I'm really more concerned with where do we go from here. I think there's going to be ample opportunity for us to really look into the matter in a whole number of areas. The biological considerations, the Department of Health, the EPA, and how they fit into the process. And the communication and notification. I mean, I think we all have questions. I think we have questions. I think our constituents have questions. I believe that other municipalities that are served by our water plant have questions. But right now, where do we go from here? What are we doing to ensure right now that our residents have safe drinking water? What does the timeline look like? Are we going to continue with the bottled water distribution? And thereafter, as I said, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for us to dig into deeper and potentially not necessarily point fingers, but to get some answers and try to figure out what we can do in the future to make sure that we don't get here again, that we're not put in this position in the future. But what are we doing now, and where do we go from here?
So the first things we have to do is to get off the water advisory is to have samples that come up clear. So for that, we are going to continue doing the free chlorination. And once we get the samples that are clear, we're going to continue free chlorination a little bit longer just for caution. And then after that, we will probably go into more of weekly sampling, and then we might go into bi-weekly sampling. For the part of how do you treat when algae comes in, what do we need to do, those are some things that we are looking at right now as to do we need to bring anything potable, kind of any ozone reactors, or are there other mitigation efforts that can be done to, in case we see another episode, what are we going to do? So we are looking at short term right now to make sure that we get the water to be safe, which is the chlorination process, and continuing with the powdered activated carbon and our filters. And then we are going to come back and continue working on for future that this kind of episode we can do better at.
And you're right, Mr. President. We will be doing a full after-action report, lessons learned. I've told staff in our conversations to take notes, how we can do better, how we can improve. But this is, we're not going to lose the learning opportunities presented by the situation. You have follow-up?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Colquitt, for the explanation. I still think that I need a little more clarity, and our citizens deserve probably a little more clarity when it comes to what timeline we're looking at now with the current situation that we're in. I mean, I've heard by the end of the week, we're hoping that we'll be able to lift the advisory. Are we on track for something like that, for a notice to go out sometime before the end of the week?
We're very optimistic because the free chlorine in all the literature and everything that we've talked to DEP about and DOH about will make the difference. So we are very hopeful and cautiously optimistic about that we will get both samples for both days that we are sending out clear. But we will continue daily sampling until we get those consecutive days of clear sampling. And then for good measure, we're going to continue doing some chlorination still, just in case. And we are sampling in the distribution system also. So we're not just sampling at the point of entry from the plant, but we are sampling in the distribution system. And we are going to the ends of the system to ensure that there is nothing in the distribution system. That's why we're flushing. And so cautiously optimistic by end of the week. But I want to make sure that we continue doing what we need to do to ensure that there is no algal toxin in the distribution system. If that means we have to continue doing free chlorination for a little bit longer, that's what we'll do.
When did we start using the free chlorination?
We started on Saturday afternoon.
Follow up.
And before you can put out an additional advisory, hopefully that you can lift the current advisory, hopefully by the end of the week, or whatever time is appropriate, will we have to wait until we receive authorization from the Florida Department of Health and via a state certified lab, a lab in Tallahassee? Do we have to wait for that result to come back before we can have the all clear?
Yes, we do need to get, we are working on the language right now while we are waiting. So we are getting that language, we're looking at that language internally, then we're going to send it to Department of Health by tonight or tomorrow. So we have it ready to go as soon as we get 2 consecutive results. And it is a state certified lab, it's actually a DEP lab that's doing the analysis. So as soon as they can, they will get us the results. And once we have 2 consecutive days of results, we should be able to go back to DOH based on what they've told us and be able to lift. But like I said, we will still continue doing some more chlorination, free chlorination, and we will continue sampling on a weekly basis until we are sure that we are in the.
And that's the lab we flew things up to, the samples
Correct.
up today. It's a state certified lab.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, I know, all that you did this weekend. I talked to many residents, and they were commending your team for so proactively, working on this issue. Obviously, this is something that, as it's getting hotter and their environmental issues are, people are not blaming us for those issues. I think the problem is with the timeline. So I'm wondering if in the future, how often will we be testing in the future now that we know we've had this issue one time? And in the future, if we had a very high rating, I think we would know that it was not a mistake. And so could we assume then the next time that we could take that first reading and be able to move forward with, putting it out in the public? I think right now it's been hard because for 10 days, people have been drinking this water. I've heard from people whose animals have been sick, and whether or not it's really attributed to this water, we don't know. But it also really impacted. I am the downtown commissioner. We had many restaurants that were looking forward to a very lively weekend, the first weekend kind of post-vaccination, to get a lot of people in and excited. So it was very hard for them to know what to do and to not be having given any warning up until Saturday morning they woke up and they had to scramble. So I guess I'm just wondering, going forward, if this was going to be the case, would we know from the first reading that we need to take it seriously and we can start issuing something to let the public know?
I don't want anybody to think we were not taking it seriously. I know we were looking whether it could be an anomaly, but we were taking it seriously, and we started the PAC and we started looking at what else needs to be done, but we wanted to confirm those results based on the EPA guidelines. We will definitely be sampling more. It'll be either weekly or bi-weekly, and we're going to continue doing that until we feel that we are at least out of the season for when algal toxins grow more. In the future, we will also have better guidelines from DEP and DOH as to how we want to go about it. We will definitely discuss if there's anything else that they feel that we need to do differently. We will definitely follow whatever regulatory agencies ask us to do. We have done that. We actually really pride ourselves to be transparent and open, and we have proactively continued to work on that. So, to your question, can we tell somebody for the restaurants? We couldn't have told anything until we had that advisory in place, and the public notifications have to go out to everybody at the same time. I can't send it to one person and not to another person. It has to be sent out at the same time, because you can't say that this person needs to know before this other person needs to know. That's just EPA requires you for any drinking water public notifications to go out. So so I'm not sure whether we can tell anybody before, like you were asking about the restaurants, but we will definitely be doing more proactive testing on a regular basis until we get out of the season.
And Poonam, talk about the number of surface water systems in the state and the number of times this has come up as an issue anywhere in the state.
In state of Florida, I believe there are 12 surface water plants, and I'm not even sure if all of them are sampling for cylindrospermopsin. I haven't gone back and I haven't had time to go check. I will probably check on that also, whether all of them are doing the proactive testing that we have continued to do. But none of them have, and DEP told us this, that they haven't seen anybody report any cylindrospermopsin in the state before.
Follow up, Commissioner Shove.
Thank you. I kind of wanted to follow up on some of the thoughts Commissioner Peduzzi had on the here and now, because I think where, again, we've done well is the science. I mean, Dr. Kalka, you've done amazing things on water treatment, and we are here because you were proactively testing for this. So it's not the science that has caused us to have this issue. It's been the communication and what is the timing and understanding this is a new anomaly. The question of where do we go from here, I think still stands a bit in my mind. I understand we can't reissue or update an official advisory until Department of Health signs off on it. What can we communicate out to the public? Can we communicate the results of the tests that are happening? And so our business owners can make their own decisions based upon what data is out there and what that means. I think I'd still like to understand the path forward for communicating the status at current. So the official advisory, I understand what needs to occur for the official advisory to be issued, but on a day-to-day basis, what our residents need to know is how do they stay safe? And so how are we communicating to them what the latest information is and what can be communicated?
I will have to go back and talk to Department of Health to ask what they're okay with us putting out. I don't have any problems depending on what results we get as to what we need to do next and follow up from there. But I can get back to the mayor and maybe city administrator and we can let you know. But our goal is to, as soon as we get the 2 consecutive samples that are clear, 2 consecutive days, for us to go back and rescind and lift the water advisory as soon as possible. That's what we are working on. That's why we've talked about that we were able to work with the sheriff's office, which is incredible because we were able to save so much time. We are looking at if it means 2 people need to drive to Tallahassee, we'll do that. We'll do whatever we need to get us lift this water advisory, because I know how much of an inconvenience and how worrisome it can be for everybody. So we are working very hard to do all of those things, but we will hopefully know in a day or so how the first samples did, and that'll give us a much better indication of what to expect.
Best case scenario, we had a sample go up today. We'll have a sample go up tomorrow, which is Wednesday. They have pretty much a 24-hour turnaround on those tests?
We are hoping that they are expediting all the analysis.
So Thursday sometime, we should have the result of the second test, and fingers crossed, best case scenario, those will be the 2 days of testing. And I've already arranged to have a press conference Friday morning, hopefully to present good news. Now, The actual lifting of the advisory, you're working on that language with the Department of Health now as to what has to be done, what they're looking for, and if anything, in addition to the 2 days of testing, correct?
Correct. So we are working on that language, so as soon as we get those results, can we put out a lift
Right.
notice? That is our goal.
Sure, and I guess my question, Mayor, would be between now and Friday, should residents look for phone calls through the phone call system to update them on the situation as to where water pods are, if they continue to need water? You know, I think there'll still be a number of questions from residents between now and Friday. And, you know, hopefully, again, with the proactive timeline, I guess I'm just trying to set the expectation of should residents look on social media? Should they look for press releases? Should they look for phone calls? What can we tell residents how can we tell them they'll be updated?
Well, residences should assume we're in the status quo until otherwise advised. I've advised staff, and we'll get Mr. Chief Bloomfield up to talk about the distribution of water. We'll keep a POD open. I think we've reached out to each of you and asked you if you know of anyone who's homebound that needs water. I know we are trying to get out and deliver water to those who can't make it to the POD. And I've advised staff to keep that open until such time as we get through this. So it's going to be open at least until Friday. And people should assume that we remain under the advisory until we tell them we're not under the advisory. There won't be any changes until we get those test results back. And I said at the earliest at sometime Thursday. We don't know what they're going to look like. But so again, we're seeking and urging and begging for everyone's patience. I know this is hard, and we're trying everything we can to expedite it, but we can't make a move until we get those test results back, which will not happen until Thursday. And thank goodness we have the sheriff helped us, because it would have been delayed even further. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's all we could say.
And Commissioner, you don't want to cause confusion by saying one thing and not getting the second sample clear. We always have to make sure that we are following the guidelines for safety, health and safety of all our residents. So you don't want to say that, okay, one day samples came out fine, the chances of the second day samples fine should really, really be almost 100%. But until we get that result and we see it, we can't lift an advisory. So you don't want to cause confusion and cause somebody anybody in the vulnerable population to think it's safe if it might not be.
Sure, I certainly understand that, but I think in this case, more communication is better communication, and even the repetition of the message, because you will see messages both on social media, we'll get emails and phone calls of, has the advisory been lifted yet? What's the status? Where can I get water? And I understand that these messages are going out, but I think the more we continue to beat that drum, repetition causes everyone to start to get the message, even those who are not getting it. So I guess to the extent that we can continue to just provide the update that it is the status quo until it is not, would be appreciated.
Understood.
Yeah, and I ended up talking to at least a couple of media people today just to answer that question and give an update. So we'll continue doing whatever we need to get the message out.
Any other? Yeah, Commissioner Lambert. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Let me go to Commissioner Warren. She hasn't spoken yet.
Hi. I have several questions, comments, pros and cons. And I'm no scientist, but I do know, or from what I know that algae has existed and is one of the oldest life forms. It's been around, it'll probably be around long after we're gone. And I can appreciate that we were proactive in doing the testing that we started back in 2016. But when we talk about lay people, what I'm understanding is that our scientists and people still didn't know how to respond to this in a very efficient way as it related to the EPA and who was vulnerable and what we needed to do next. So if we at that level had a lot of concerns, we have to really respect and appreciate that our citizens have concerns, and that what they don't know and don't understand leads to fear. And then that fear can also lead to anger, and it leads to a whole range of different emotions. So I think that it's imperative that we recognize that, and that we do everything that we can to ensure that our citizens know that they come first and that they come before policy and different things. And we must recognize the importance of their trust in us in these emergency situations. So that's a comment that I have. And I also would like to acknowledge how quickly the city of West Palm Beach responded with the water distribution, identifying the sites and adding additional sites for safe water distribution. And I'd like to commend the staff that went out to ensure that that happened in a timely manner. As it relates to the communication, is it at all possible to look at the fastest way to get the information to us? Because for me, it's easier to open a text message versus an email. I'm more likely to see that, to respond to it, and then to be able to move on it versus an email that I may not open right away. I didn't see that email immediately. There are some people that didn't see it until the following day. When I saw it, I couldn't sleep that night, and I was up trying to figure out, how do I get this information out to people as quickly as possible? So then I began to collect the data and send it out to homeowners association presidents by text message, because that was the only way that I could think of. That was the only channel that was available to me at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning. Can we look at how we can get information to us as quickly as possible in emergency situations?
Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly explore that. One of the things I've directed, even during this crisis, is that when we send out either press releases or media advisories, that it go to the 5 of you first. Now, if you're saying you would rather have that by text message, can we text you and tell you to check your email, or do you have the capability of check? Okay, so we can add that to the protocol. Maybe text each of the individual commissioners, tell them to check the email. We'll get you an email as to what's coming down the pike, because the communications knows to send a copy of that advisory or press release to you all before it goes out to the public. And then we'll add to that you all should each get a text to say, important information, check your email or something like that.
Emergency email alert.
Okay,
something
we
like
can do that. Okay, now Commissioner Lambert, you had a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And I echo the comments of our commissioners, and thank you so much to our staff and to our first responders, to all the staff who were able to provide bottled water to our residents very quickly. I think that that's great, and I think it's important that we focus on solutions and what we can do to better prepare ourselves moving forward. It sounds like from what you've said and what I've read is that the summer months may produce more of these blooms, and so I'm just curious if we can start planning now. I know this is going to sound funny, but plan for the unexpected. Similarly to how we have a hurricane season. We don't know when a hurricane will happen, but we do a lot of communications to our residents to plan for in case those things happen. And so, I'm specifically concerned about our populations that are vulnerable, who might not be signed up for the e-newsletter, might not be signed up for the text message. I did receive the text message and the robocall, but I did talk to some residents who are not signed up for that system. And so I just want to make sure we have an outreach process in place so that, residents and individuals who, might not know about these concerns can be informed and prepared as well.
Yeah, and that's not really for Dr. Callcat to address, but we will address that internally. I know we're sending things out over social media, press releases, and if you have any suggestions for how else to meet these people where they are, we're certainly open to them. Clearly, we're trying to get as much information out as possible, not just relying upon email blasts, but we're talking to the media daily. And doing everything we can. And we even use a reverse 911 on this, which is normally reserved for life-threatening situations such as hurricanes, but we thought this important enough to at least get, so we are looking for ways, and certainly open to suggestions on better ways we can communicate. Yes.
Just one of those ideas, Mayor, might be to utilize our water bill and to put information in that. If we're talking about all residents who receive water services from us, that might be one of.
Meaning emergency notification in the water bill?
Not an emergency, no, for preparation, what I talked about in preparation for the upcoming months and things that they can be doing to be prepared.
Oh, such as keeping the supply of bottled water around, or?
I'm
Okay.
not sure what the solutions would be, but just thinking about more ways, maybe that we're asking them to sign up for the e-newsletter, we're asking them to sign up for the text messaging services so that we can say, hey, in case emergencies happen, we want to be able to reach you.
Okay, all right, that's fine, that's
Yeah,
fine.
we
Because
do-
different toxins have different effects.
Yeah, we do have bill inserts for all kinds of things when summer season's starting, when hurricane season's starting, when rainy season's starting, and even for rags and other things that can clog up our collection system, how to maintain swell. So we have a lot of, and we'll add some of this, whatever we can, for people to prepare. And I appreciate you asking what can we do, and that's why I was talking about going to the district and asking for some of our groundwater that we can bring in, because that should help. And Commissioner Warren, I totally appreciate what you're saying. I've been going through the same angst and worry, so I understand what you're saying.
Any other questions or comments for Poonam? Because I do want to get Chief Bloomfield up to talk about what we have been doing in terms of distribution. Anything else? Okay, thank you for that presentation. Chief Bloomfield, you want to talk to us about the distribution program over the last few days?
Sir. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Let me take this off.
Good evening.
Brent Bloomfield, Assistant Fire Chief and Emergency Manager for the city. So, no, that's not gonna work. So I just want to give you an overview of what we've done so far and where we're at right now. Timeline of the event. So basically we started on Saturday, May 29th. That was our first pod that we set up. It was at Gaines Park. As you can see, we went through 22 pallets of water, which is 27,000 bottles that day. On May 30th, we decided to extend out our pods, and we opened one up at Gaines Park, Phipps Park in the south end, and Coleman Park in the north end. We wanted to make sure that we got to kind of all stretches of the city, north, south, and central. On that day, we did 32 pallets, which was 48,000 bottles of water. We ended up doing 22 pallets at Gaines Park, which was about 4-to-1 over the other two locations. We did 5 pallets each, basically at the north and south location. On the 31st, we decided to expand it even more. We decided to keep the pod open at Gaines Park, but we just didn't want to focus on pods. We wanted to focus on other areas as well. So we ended up sending out I think we ended up doing 22 pallets at the nursing homes, through the homeless groups, to the housing authority, and to also some homebound people that we started getting in through either calls through the 822 system or through the commissioners and through other agencies that were started to push out that they had some homebound individuals that needed water. So then it leads us up to today, or June 1st, where we did another 41 pallets or 61,500 bottles today at Gaines Park again. We also still worked on the homebound population. We actually send out 3 units with 2 personnel in each one that went out. We started receiving even more on the 822 system, and then even more through the commissioners and through other agencies. So total total water distribution up to this point, 137 pallets, 199,500 bottles of water. Total cost was $34,387. And we ordered another 100 pallets, which will be delivered they started delivering them today, and they'll be delivered through tomorrow. We will keep the pod open at Gaines Park. And as you can see, the plan moving forward, logistically, and the reason why we went with Gaines Park, I've been asked this question a few times. The reason why we keep it at Gaines Park is because it's, number one, it's centrally located. Number two, it's very easy in and out of that location. If you've ever been out there, we have one road that leads from Australian all the way through to North Mangonia. It makes it for an ease of operation for that location. When you start looking around the city for other areas, some of the other areas that we look at, the issue becomes we tie up traffic. We don't have as much ease in and out. So that's why we wanted to keep it at Gaines Park. It's a fantastic location. It's what we used for COVID testing. It's what we used for COVID vaccines. So we tend to use that one regularly. It is also one of our approved pod locations for hurricanes. So we really like that location, and that's why we continue to use it. We will continue to distribute as of right now through Friday. The distribution will be from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., just like we have the last 2 days. And then we'll keep that through Friday, and if we have to expand that, we'll make sure to do that. If the water test comes back, we can expand that through the weekend and so forth. So while I'm here, I just want to thank the collaborative effort of the city. We really came together as a team. We found out this on Friday night, and by Saturday morning, we had over 30 people out at the park distributing water from parks, from public works, from utilities, from fire, from police. So it was really a collaborative effort, and I can't thank everybody enough for that. It's really just been it's been heartwarming to see that how we came together as a city. With seeing some of the commissioners come out and some of the directors come out, and actually we had directors out there slinging water. We had commissioners out there slinging water. The mayor came out, so that's the mayor came out, and he actually helped out one day too as well. So it's just been such a collaborative effort, and I can't thank everybody enough for coming out. And I could take questions at this time.
I do want to reemphasize that last point, because this has truly been an all-hands-on-deck effort from our employees. And we even had the city attorney and the city administrator out there helping out. Yeah. Brett, do you want to mention any of the retailers that we had to go to initially to kind of cut some deals with that were very helpful to us?
Yeah, actually, Sam's Club on 45th Street has been absolutely amazing. I think we've 100 of those pallets actually came through them. They were open over the Memorial Day weekend. They were one of the only distributors open over the Memorial Day weekend. So they've been fantastic. They let us store the water there and just come get it as we needed. And they've been fantastic. Restaurant Depot was another one that was great, and then of course Home Depot, we got some from them as well. So, but Sam's Club was definitely the front runner in that one.
Now here is we need to kind of. We've been using the honor system because the advisory was very clear that the water is safe for consumption, cooking, and bathing for all but certain defined vulnerability groups. Now, we haven't been checking, but I would just ask the public, if you are not in one of those vulnerable groups, please do not get the water, do not hoard the water so that we don't jeopardize running out of water for those who truly need it. All right, the advisory was very clear. If you're not in a vulnerable group, our water is safe, and so we would just hope people would, again, using the honor system, we would just hope people would heed that and be good citizens. And if you're not in a vulnerable group, there's no need to get the bottled water. But you could see by the amount of water we've been distributing, and I've heard of cars even doubling back to get extra. So please, let's consider our fellow neighbor, particularly those who might be most in need. Any questions? Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, and I'll agree with you. The work of our employees, our staff members, was inspiring. It was just unbelievable that you were able to pull that together and so quickly. No one's questioning or pointing fingers at that response. I mean, you all have done a phenomenal job of responding to a need and responding to it quickly. The question that I have is, how are we looking for supply of water through the end of the week? And have we seen any shortages in any of our, businesses, Publix, the like within the city?
Yeah, so we haven't seen any shortages at all. As a matter of fact, when I went to Sam's Club today, and I asked for another 40 pallets, they smiled and said, "Is that all you need?" So they have plenty of water there. We worked with a distributor out of Miami today. We have 100 pallets that are en route. Actually, they delivered 39 of them tonight, and they're going to deliver the rest tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon. So we have over 100 pallets coming. That should get us through at least Friday. If our calculations, our burn rate is approximately 40 pallets a day, so we should be able to get through Friday. And if we need more, we can always go to Sam's. It's been great. So so as far as that goes, we're great. I haven't heard of any type of reduction in anybody's supply around here.
Fantastic, thank you.
Any other, yeah, Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much to you. You spent your whole presentation thanking everyone else on the team, and I watched you go out and buy 100 sandwiches for the volunteers. So, I mean, nothing was unturned. You ran such an incredible operation. I saw so many of our directors out there directing traffic, some of our senior people just throwing water in the back of their truck to run out to do home deliveries. And so I can't thank you enough for, spending your holiday weekend, helping our residents, and it's just so appreciated.
Appreciate it. Thank you.